the FMCSA, and we have a good lineup of questions for him. And then we're going to talk about some business questions, but the majority of the questions that came in had to do with layoffs, no big surprise there, employee treatment, and COVID-19, no surprise there either. I also had a boatload of non-compete questions coming in. We will talk a little bit about that as well. So before Jim gets on, thank you, Chris. You are amazing. Before Jim gets on the phone with us, which he will in just a few minutes, which somebody don't let me forget to call the guy. What I want to do is I want to tell you guys about a few things that I saw in the news. I'm trying not to yell and scream and throw a fit on live stream about this. All right, so this week in North Texas, a truck driver fell asleep on the road and churned over his vehicle. And his cargo, people made jokes, but it wasn't really joke-worthy, was full of toilet paper, caught on fire. And then we have another accident where a driver in Florida, I think, also fell asleep across the median. He was driving a log truck, and he rolled his truck, and he actually ended up dying. So hear me now to our industry, because when the hours of service waiver came out, what was the first thing I said to everybody? I told you guys not to go balls to the walls. Don't overwork yourselves. Don't get tired. Put yourself before the cargo. Put yourself before our industry. So I hope these drivers and the brokers and the shippers who are on right now remember what I said, is that this general freight cargo, no cargo is worth somebody's life. So I want everybody to remember that if you're tired, don't drive. For those of you who are not really hearing my safety message as clear as I would like you to, remember this: whatever waivers going on and whatever regulations exemptions have been made by the FMCSA. Recently, I saw that there were some permit exemptions where now, if you have a CLP or whatever it's called, you can now drive without a CDL driver with you. I want you to remember, when these regulations have exemptions and been waived, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get sued. Plaintiff attorneys, I'm sure there are some watching this. They're probably licking their chops right now, waiting for y'all to mess up. And what they're going to say is, how come you're retired? Or how come you put an inexperienced driver behind the wheel? This is your normal practice for training, that you just throw somebody on the road like this with some permit. Is that normal? Oh, the FMCSA provided you a waiver or exemption? Well, that's nice. Do you think that's safe? That's you answering questions to deposition, just in case you missed that. That's what it will sound like. And when you go to trial, or when you are deposed a year later or 2 years later, when everybody's forgotten that you ran, 20-hour days trying to get people their stupid goods, the juries are all cooled off. They're not as grateful to truck drivers anymore and trucking companies. Remember this and hear me now about this. So that's my major point about regulations and the waivers and exemptions and safety and putting yourselves first. Because guess what? I get to start off my show with points, and you guys have to listen to me because I'm also doing free answers and questions too. And I got the mic. So here's my third point before we get Jim on the phone and we start answering questions. Point number 3, okay? Which is these layoffs and non-competes. I'm actually starting to become grateful that TQL has completely bombed whatever they did, whether it was terminations or layoffs. I'm not grateful for the fact that people lost their jobs and how they were treated. That's not what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the fact that it has put a spotlight on our industry and non-competes and how we treat employees on the way out the door. And I have been seeing quite a bit of good come out of it as in companies are understanding that all eyes are on them and the way they lay people off and how they're enforcing their non-competes. And I've been seeing it throughout the week. And that's exciting after having a very tough week the week before, hearing everything that TQL had done. And then it wasn't just TQL, it was other companies as well. But the piece that the TQL really, conduct really opened up was perhaps how poorly TQL has been treating people for years. And I say that based on all the comments on my posts regarding TQL. So there is some good that maybe came out of that. And I think there's more to come next week. So I don't think that TQL issue is going away. I would also like to illuminate that those companies who are doing the right thing and they're trying their hardest to keep employees on the payroll, or when they lay employees off, they're treating them well, and they're releasing them out of their non-competes, and they're trying to pay them and trying to help them find other jobs, that will be remembered for a long time. I can already see it going on. And then there are a couple companies this week that decided that it was a good week to have all their employees sign non-competes, or they're fired. I heard that. So for those of you out there who were like, gasp, how did you figure that out? Oh, that was supposed to be confidential. Y'all got leaks. Because I'm not the only one that's hearing about this either. So know that all eyes are on you, transportation companies and leaders. Know that. Kind of feels good right now because there are a lot of good companies out there that are doing good things too. So we're about to call Jim. And before we call Jim, I'm going to scan my comments, but I'm also going to ask those of you out there who have already started to make snarky little comments about Jim, can you please be nice? He's doing me a huge favor coming on. I mean, I'm just little Cassandra. Who the fuck am I? Nobody. He's coming on to help people and answer questions and to be helpful to us. So let's try our hardest not to chase him away. Dude, chase him away on somebody else's channel. Okay, so here we go. Scott Thompson, thanks for joining me. Angela Lee, thanks for joining. And let's see, Ronald Pfeiffer, it's always good to see you. And I follow you on Twitter. You have good content. And then Antonio, Tony, you already know I said thanks. All right. Know that if you're on Facebook, I'm going to ask that you please try your hardest to either get on LinkedIn or get on the Vimeo link, which you'll see is in my Facebook invite, because Vimeo is much easier. All right, so let's get to go. Oh God, Frank said he has his list of questions already. If anybody remembers Frank from last time, he also gave us some jokes. Before we call Jim, let me just pop in with one more thing. So what are the future ramifications with CDL permitted drivers now being allowed to drive? We're going to ask Jim a couple questions about that because that waiver did come out. Sorry. You guys all know that I like to wiggle, and it's driving me nuts that I'm cramped in this corner with this camera. But I do want to touch on this very quickly, even though I kind of already went on a little rant. But I want you guys to know that I would highly, highly advise you to continue operations as normal, and to disregard all of these exemptions and waivers unless you absolutely 100% need it. And I will ask one thing that's even more important, is those of you who are brokers, please do not push carriers to violate the regulations. Please do not push carriers to take advantage of any of these waivers or anything like that. Stay out of their business. One, carriers have enough pressure as it is. And I'm not stupid. I see all the chats going on, and I see people talking about how brokers are telling them to, oh, boss of the world, run as many loads as you can, blah, blah, blah. Or you don't need a CDL, you blah, blah, blah. Like, just brokers, stay the hell out of it. And carriers don't need the pressure. And then also, you're going to get yourselves in trouble too. So I want to remind some of you out there who went to the Carrier 411 conference where I spoke. The Carrier 411, their keynote speaker was a plaintiff attorney. Does anybody remember Plaintiff Joe? That's what I named him. Plaintiff Joe, Plaintiff Attorney Joe. Plaintiff Attorney Joe, he was very jazzed up to sue brokers. And you can ask anybody who went to that conference. It was a little stomach churning to hear him talk about how he loves to sue brokers and why he sues brokers. So brokers, it's your turn now in the industry, and we're already starting to see that. And we need to call Jim, but don't think that your comments to carriers about violations and waiving regulations is going to go unnoticed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's call Jim. I pray to God this works. It did the last few times, but lawyers and technology, All right, calling Jim. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Please work. Okay, I think it's working, you guys.
This is Jim.
Hi, Jim. It's Cassandra. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. All right, let me just check with the team. Jason and Francis, can you hear Jim okay? And will you let me know if I need to turn him up? Those are my friends, and they'll let us know live if I need to turn you up. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. And first of all, how was your week? Was it crazy?
Well, there's a lot going on, a lot of issues that need to be resolved, and you get one solved, and it seems like another one pops up. So,
yes.
Yeah, it's been pretty active.
And it feels like, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Frank. They let us know that they can hear you just fine. I'm going to pull up the graphic that I created for you. People are pretty patient with me on this, Jim, this live thing, because they know I'm a lawyer and they know technology is, not my thing. So I apologize if this is not what you are used to. So I have some questions for you, and I compiled them, and some of them were some pretty good softballs for you, Jim. I was like, it's Friday. People are like, some of them are intense, and some of them were pretty easy. So first of all, you are the acting administrator of the FMCSA, and someone asked a really good question about that. They said, what does that mean? And what does Jim have to do all day long?
So what that means is within the DOT, they have several modes. They call them modes, or you can call them agencies, sub-agencies. So, Rail, Federal Rail Association, Aviation, we're all familiar with FAA, and of course, FMCSA, the motor carriers. And each mode has an administrator who is essentially the CEO, if you will, of that particular mode. They run the mode. And there's statutory provisions. The administrator of these modes, they're appointed by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. And when there is a vacancy in that position, the individual who's a deputy administrator becomes the acting administrator. So in October, I moved from chief counsel to deputy administrator, which was when Administrator Martinez went to Volpe in the DOT. And so when I was made deputy, at the same time, I was made acting administrator. So that's what the title means. And yep, that's what I do. I'm in charge of the agency, from policy to enforcement to research to you name it.
And you've been there for what, a couple of years now with the FMCSA?
Yeah, I was appointed as chief counsel in June of 18. Boy, almost 2 years now. Yeah.
Okay. And then I wrote down here that you had been with Warner for about 10 years. And then after that, you had your own consulting gig for about 2 years. And then this is my question, because when I went from being an outside lawyer working at an outside law firm to in-house, there were some big, huge learning curves for me. So I was curious what the big learning curves for you going from working at Warner in the industry to all of a sudden working for the government in a different role.
Yeah, it was a pretty significant transition. Things within the government work at a different pace. And sometimes that's really good, and sometimes it's frustrating. So that was kind of the utmost change for me. It was just the pace at which things are done. And then kind of in private practice or even in private companies, you're pretty much used to, you develop a plan, you make a decision, you execute. The deliberation process in the government is considerably more extensive than in private sector.
Yeah.
And at first I was, this is kind of a waste of time, just slowing things down with no purpose. But I've changed my tune on that a little bit. It's still frustrating, the time and some other things, but there's good reason for why there's a concurrent process. And, oftentimes we have to even look to other agencies for their input before we can pull the trigger on things. And there's a lot of times we do things that have ripple effects across other industries and stakeholders. So it's time consuming. It can be frustrating, but I see the point and the purpose behind it all.
Yeah. I felt as though you guys moved very quick getting us information and exemptions and the resources that we needed with the whole COVID situation going on. So that part didn't seem to move slow. You guys reacted really well and quickly too. Or did it feel slow?
No, yeah. So it was extremely swift. And when I talk to the FMCSA team, I often say to them, the pace and the swiftness by which we were doing these things, but yet the accuracy intact and protecting safety it's impressive. I mean, and I don't just because I'm involved in the process. It's impressive. It's literally unprecedented, and it's done not just through the agency, it's through the whole DOT. Pretty much everything that we've done of I was going to say of significance, if that's the right word, but that has far-reaching effect has gone through interagency and White House approval, and the change in the process has been extremely helpful in getting things from point A to point B and out as quickly as possible. I mean, we're just in unprecedented times. We all know that.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to, consider it, massage it, and go do something else for a week and come back to it. We got to mobilize, act, and move on to the next task. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite wonderful and very helpful to have the information. You guys continuously put out information as well. I think recently there was there's some waivers that came out with regards to permits, and it feels like maybe every 3 days you guys are putting out some more information. It's pretty darn helpful. So I have some interesting questions for you. This is the one that kept coming up over and over again. And Jim, before I give you the question, I want you to know this does not come from me. Because when the ELD mandate finally went into effect, and I'm talking to all my audience out there too, everyone who follows me knows that I was kind of angry for about a week because there were a lot of complaints saying that the ELDs caused accidents and that the ELDs were ruining people's lives and businesses, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting because in Cassandra's world, the thing that everyone seemed to have missed is that the ELDs are not the problem. The fact that everybody was not used to actually following the hours of service regulations is what the problem was. And people didn't like hearing that. And that's my little vent before I ask you this question. But people want to know, is the FMCSA going to consider waiving the ELD requirements during this time period due to the fact that there are so many interruptions with some of these companies doing layoffs? I think Keep Trucking was one of them. And there's a couple others out there. And that was the question. Whether I agree with it or not, that's the question for you.
Okay. Well, as I'm guessing all your followers know, the ELD was a congressional mandate where FMCSA was required to promulgate a rule and enforce the rule on ELDs. And we probably all know that there's an exception for ag communities on the enforcement of those ELD provisions. So it's it's not something that the FMCSA can do. We don't have the authority to tell Congress thanks but no thanks. So that won't be happening.
Okay. So all of my truckers out there who were very excited and hoping that Jim would say, yes, go for it, guys. No more ELDs, balls to the walls, in Cassandra's words. No, we're still following the ELD and the regulations. That's what I'm hearing. I'm just translating it into Cassandra's words because I get really fired up about ELDs. And so I think I've got a bunch of disappointed listeners out there. Oh, well. Here's the other question. This was also interesting. Okay, Jim, many of my followers that are listening right now, if not 75% of them, are logistics companies. And lately we've been sued quite a bit by plaintiff attorneys, obviously, for negligent selection of motor carriers and vicarious liability, mainly to do with, obviously, the carriers getting accidents. And indeed, there was a conference recently that I spoke at in Chattanooga where the Carrier 411 invited a plaintiff attorney to speak. And the plaintiff attorney spoke at length about how he sues brokers. Is there anything around the corner that could give the brokers in the industry more data or more direction on how to select a motor carrier?
More data or criteria on how to select a motor carrier. The process, I guess I'd say so CSA is intended to be a tool for the agency to utilize to prioritize carriers for high risk investigations. And there's got to be a system to do that. Congress mandated that we have a system to do it, but obviously common sense, you run any business, you got to figure out how you make decisions. And when your task is to do investigations of motor carriers that present a risk to the motoring public, you got to figure out who those folks are. And back in 2008, 9, 10, as you know, the agency came up with the CSA as the platform by which they're going to do that. I was actually in the industry at the time. I had nothing to do with it. But that's the purpose behind CSA. And then, unfortunately, it has taken on kind of a life of its own, and it's had collateral consequences. Mm-hmm. And I think probably most of you folks know, especially your lawyer listeners, that there are caveats, warnings, whatever you want to call it, on the CSA or FMCSA website as it relates to CSA. Mm-hmm. But apparently, folks just don't pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. I know that it gets into litigation. If I was a judge, there's no way in the world I would bet that into evidence. And there's no basis in law or fact why you would permit that into evidence. If insurance carriers are using that as their underwriting decisions, that's not the advice I would be giving. If I were running an insurance company, that's not the way I would do it. Mm-hmm. And so it has these collateral consequences. And as you also know, we're looking at another system, the item response theory, which, again, Congress mandated that the agency look at as a possible alternative to CSA, and we're in that deliberation process. So, but to that extent, what else could we do? What else can the agency do by way of data to provide greater visibility for brokers to choose motor carriers? Candidly, nothing comes to mind on what else we could do just on the visibility and data. That's a good question. We'll get us some thoughts on anything else we could do or provide that isn't already accessible. We'll think about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's definitely something that's been brewing in the industry. All right, so 2 more questions, and then we'll release you from the hot seats. So this is an interesting one. Back to the FMCSA's changes over the last few weeks. And directions and guidance. So the question is, what were the reasons behind why the FMCSA decided not to enforce the registration fee for the temporary operating authority? And who usually applies for such authority? I thought that was a pretty good question.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the process, and there's call it the NED, the NEDD, the waiver of the fee. The intent, again, I shouldn't speak out of school, but So I don't know exactly how encompassing it is, but the intent is to get entrance into the marketplace quickly in a crisis situation where capacity and whatnot is a problem. And so that's the intent behind waiving the registration. What was the second part of the question, Cassandra?
The second part of the question was who usually applies for this temporary operating authority?
So I believe from time, so you'll see intra-state operators.
That's what I was thinking too.
For it. You might, yeah. And then I think that there are some motor coach operators that ask for temporary authority to move cargo.
Okay.
And it hasn't been a lot. It's been, well, I shouldn't say it's been dozens, but it hasn't been hundreds or thousands. But that's the purpose, and that seems to be who's doing that, who's asking for that temporary authority.
Okay. And then what was the other thing? There was one other question for you. This was an easy one for you to finish with, is what have you been working on, or what do you plan to work on next week? And what are you seeing in the industry from your perspective at a higher level than what we're seeing in, down on the ground?
So I don't know. I'm seeing anything more that you folks aren't seeing. In fact, oftentimes you guys are our eyes and ears, so we appreciate all the data and information you provide to us. The hot items are making sure that we have new entrants in the pipeline, new drivers in the pipeline. And I assume probably most of your listeners know that step one is a individual who wants to be a truck driver has to get their commercial learner's permit, their CLP, which is required if you take a knowledge test, which currently in all states, the knowledge test is administered by a state employee, employed by the state DMV. Well, we have 22 DMVs closed, so that's putting pressure points on folks. And so we're working directly with state officials, AMBA. Of course, we're looking at our own regulatory landscape to see what we can do to do a couple of things by way of relief. And just, one of the things would be to allow third-party testers, much like you have third-party skills testers in most states. And so working with states to see if, that's something they're interested in. Is it feasible? And if you're closed, DMV's closed is still really good, which it would if they open up their back offices just for the processing of the scores and the issuance of the credentials. So that's a big item, is to make sure that we continue to get new entrants and get them trained and get them into the marketplace. So I'd say that's our top priority. A couple of other top priorities, which aren't necessarily within our regulatory authority, but we're trying to make sure we're supportive and assist as best we can. Things like truck stops, making sure they're operational, making sure they're doing all they can do. Rest areas, making sure that those don't close. And then ingress and egress from hotspots. New York City was a big issue. At first it was, can I get in? That was, can I get out?
Yes.
I get out and I go back home, and my home has, mandatory quarantine, self-quarantine. If I was in a hotspot, what do I do? So, we have to work with CDC, we work with Homeland Security through the CISA, we work through these other agencies, we work directly with state and local officials. So it's as we all know, it's extremely complicated and complex, but we're trying to be as supportive as we can, push out as much data as we can, best practices and the like. So those are some of the top line items that we're addressing.
Yeah, those are pretty big. And those are the two things I hear a lot of chatter about too.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, the men and women out there delivering freight, they're doing really yeoman's work, and they deserve not only our gratitude, but our support and assistance. And we're doing all we can, and very, very appreciative and grateful for all that they do.
Yeah.
And all those support them, again, truck stops and others, warehouse workers, they're all in this together, and we want to do our part.
Yeah, and very much so. And I appreciate, we all appreciate everything you guys have been doing as well. Even with the guidance that came out with coming and going from New York City and how you guys wanted us to handle New York City shipments. I mean, that came out perfect timing, right when everyone was asking that question. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on this call. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody for listening. and the adherence to what we're trying to get accomplished together. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Wow. Talk about a man that's in government, but has his thumb on the pulse. And it's true. The FMCSA has been very fast to issue guidance to us, waivers, exemptions, no matter what we think about them, whether we approve of them or not. I mean, shoot, guys, they've been doing a good job. So I want to touch on one thing that he said before I start to go into answering questions, which is, we got him thinking about the need for data and instructions and guidance with regards to selecting a motor carrier from the context of the logistics industry. And obviously, he's got a lot going on, and everyone over there has a lot going on, and everybody in the industry has a lot going on. But we can't lose sight of that. At the Carrier 411 user conference, where they invited a plaintiff attorney, and the plaintiff attorney talked about how he was suing brokers. Someone very wisely asked if the plaintiff attorney was so passionate about safety, would he support a industry standard mandate from the government on how a broker should select a motor carrier? And the plaintiff attorney danced around that question a little bit, and the attendee was able to get the plaintiff attorney to commit. I thought that was interesting. But we do need that kind of guidance. We do. And Jim, man, he seemed to be completely understanding of where we're coming from a logistics perspective on the need for that type of direction and guidance. The plaintiff attorney who presented in Chattanooga, what is going on? And I have a lot of experience with broker liability cases. They get to, because there's no direction, there's no industry standard for selecting a motor carrier, they get to decide on how they're going to tell their story. They get to decide the standard, and then it leaves the defense chasing their tails. So it'd be very, very helpful if we could have an industry standard and guidance. I think Jim is our person to get that done. Let's go into questions. Let me check Vimeo first. I do have a good solid list of questions. Mr. Supply Chain has joined us, so thank you. He's always a great resource to join us. And let's go into questions and answers. And this is the hottest question. Give me 1 second to remove my graphic. You guys are so patient with me. Oh, this is like, I wish I had like a whole, you guys saw I had a studio last time. That was cool. They had a hard time with streaming, so it was spotty, which is not cool. When I do it for my office, I don't have spotty issues. So let's pop this up. Is it gonna work? It's gonna work. Yeah. Okay. Let's get into these questions. These were interesting and also got me fired up. Okay, so can a company ask employees to voluntarily reduce their pay? Yes. Yes, they can. As long as they give the employees, and obviously you guys know that this is educational, I'm just giving you direction. Don't sue me and be like, oh, Cassandra said da 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 da. No, when it comes to this employment law questions, when you hear employee, that means it's employment law. When it comes to that, every state is different. And it's actually quite easy to Google, by the way. It's not like a Carmack amendment where you can't, there's nothing to Google and there's a bunch of misconceptions. It's pretty easy. The states provide a lot of instructions and guidance to employees. So anyhow, so can a company ask an employee to voluntarily reduce their pay? Yes. The company has to give the employee notice. So you can't just, tell them after they've been working for 2 weeks and they got their pay and they're like, why did I get less pay? You can't be like, oh, forgot to tell you, we definitely reduced your pay. We couldn't afford it. Nah, you got to give them notice and let them decide to continue to work. And also, obviously, you have to give them above minimum wage. This is happening. This is happening, guys and gals. I know you know this, but I have gotten this question about, 20 times. So let's archive this. Archive this question, I guess, because I already hit it. I already answered it. let's skip to another one that's kind of similar to this one. I think this one's at the bottom. Okay, let's try this one. If an employee refuses to quit, what is the employer recourse and how does the decision affect both parties? Okay, hold on. Maybe I read that wrong. If the employee refuses to quit, I'm assuming that means you want the employee to quit. That's what I think that means. So you want the employee to quit. You're telling the employee, I think it's time you need to go get another job. And then the employee's like, nah, I'm cool here, thanks. All right. And then what is the employer recourse and how does the decision affect both parties? Okay. First of all, the only other recourse is you got to terminate the employee. Let's take a step back, 2 steps back, 2 steps back, 2 steps back. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. It's Friday. All right. First, I want you guys to coach employees. If you want them to quit, you're a small business. You don't have those fancy HR people. It's just you, right? And me too. I have the same thing. If you want people to quit, there is a disconnect between you and that employee. You need to do an expectations exchange. All you need to do is say, here's why I want you to quit. Obviously, you're not going to say this is why I want you to quit, but this is why it's not really working out. 1, 2, 3, 4, put it on paper, but don't make it something achievable. Don't sit there and make it like you got an attitude problem. No, how about action items? You need to come in every day with a positive attitude. So you're encouraging your teammates to continue to work hard in this tough environment. Boom. Make action items on how that employee can improve. And then tell the employee, you have a week or 2 weeks to figure this out. And then if it's time to terminate, and let the employee know, if you don't figure this out, we got to part ways. This isn't working. You guys, you got to be honest with the employee. So first, that's the first step. And I'm not assuming this person didn't do it, but by the way this question's going, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm not going to assume though. And then when it's time to terminate them, there are a lot of online resources with your state labor board and different websites that you can use. Just Google, what do I need to do if I need to terminate my employee? If you can't afford a lawyer, and read a little bit before you term. So we call it term. And there's paperwork you're supposed to do, and there's also a proper way of going about it. Good timing for me to say that right now, if you're terminating employees in this market, in this industry, I think you should say, we're going to waive your non-compete. Dude, if you're terminating people, you don't care about them anyhow. Why are you trying to hold them to a non-compete? You clearly don't value them. All right, this is archived. Boom. Hold on, let me go check my chatter to make sure you guys aren't like, all right, Frank says you tell them they're fired, secure their computer, work area, etc., and call the police and have them escorted out of the building. Okay, Frank. Okay. Frank cracked me up. All right. He's like my partner in crime. Frank actually brings up a good point. When you go to terminate an employee, make sure that you, and I'm sorry if I'm yelling, I'm very passionate. I've been dealing with terminations and layoffs all week. Make sure, Frank brings up a good point. Make sure you get their computer and you tell them in person, not email, in person, you tell them that they're terminated. You get their computer, but you also, before they leave, if you can, don't make them sit there like, come on, do this a nice way. Imagine how you'd feel if you were terminated. Put yourself in their shoes. So don't embarrass them in front of their coworkers. Be quiet about it. Don't make a big deal. Figure out a way and imagine yourself in their shoes. Because guys, when you terminate or lay off somebody, they will never forget that moment. That is a moment in their life. They will never forget it. So if you make them feel like shit and you embarrass them, they are going to resent you for a very long time. And you're actually creating a memory on somebody for the rest of their life. You're part of a really bad memory. I've been part of somebody's really bad memory. And I still remember, it haunts me at night. And also, by the way, we're in a very small industry, so don't fuck around, because that person could all of a sudden be a VP of sales at like your top shipper. And guess what? They hate you. Our industry is that small. Y'all know it. Okay. The computer thing. Just make sure they didn't download a bunch of stuff and take information because they knew it's coming. So take a peek at their computer and look at their downloads and all that jazz, if you can. Yes, Frank also makes a good point. Be aware of state laws regarding when the last paycheck needs to be provided. And also remember that each state law has like COBRA or mini COBRA, and you got to provide them information on how they'd apply for benefits and stuff like that. All right, let me just check LinkedIn real quick to make sure that nobody else had comments on this topic, because this has been going on quite a bit. And as you guys know, I do this. How are we doing on time? Son of a gun, this goes so fast. Raquel, you were awesome. Trey Griggs is on. Ryan Schreiber is making fun of my hair. Ryan. Matt is on. Oh, Matt, I miss you. Let's see. CM Evans. Hi. Okay, I'm like a, what do you call it? I see a squirrel. I get so excited. So many of my friends are on right now. I feel very fortunate. Okay. Wow, you guys have been very chatty on LinkedIn. Oh my God. How am I supposed to? Oh, Christopher, you crack me up. It's so nice to have you back, Chris. I missed you. All right, Jay. Jay, you've been quiet for 2 weeks. I've been wondering where the hell you've been, and now you look at your chats. You're going nuts, douchebag. Jay, stop that. Okay, so nobody else seems to have a question. I love Jay. I say Jay, but his name is Jamin. We all know Jamin. Jamin says, "Oh my God, Jamin, I love you." Jamin is defending me against Ryan about my hair. Jamin says, "Be empathetic." Also, small pet peeve is don't make their ass work a full day and then do it. Once you know that you're going to do everything is dialed, do it. That's a really good point. And there are a lot of theories, by the way. Some people terminate on Friday and some people actually do it on Monday. I like Fridays only because it gives time for the coworkers. Like if you do it on a Monday, everybody's gonna be chatting about it all week. If you do it on a Friday, there's some chatter over the weekend and then it dies hopefully by Monday. There's a lot of strategy behind it, but like Jay says, Jamin, is be empathetic. And he's awesome. You guys should follow Jamin if you aren't already following him. Okay, so now, and I'm sorry, I know that annoys people that, David B, I love you, man. I fucking love you. Okay, let's go to some more questions and answers because there were some really good ones. And I want to just make sure that, this was a good one. Oh, guys, I saw this one too. Okay. My company still has us working in the office. What are my employer's responsibilities to ensure I don't get COVID-19? All right. So, in most states, employers don't have to let you work remotely. There are some employers out there who have employees still in the office, and then they separate them by 6 feet, make sure they have lots of room. There's hand sanitizing stations and Lysol wipes. So there are employers that are doing this, okay? This is a tough question for me because it's not a legal question, really. It's not, because I just said most states don't have laws that require this. If your state is on a shutdown order and you're not an essential business, which most of us are, that doesn't apply either. So here's the thing that I told my clients who called me when all this shit was going down. And my clients were like, "Cassandra, this is crazy. This is a hoax. I don't want to send everybody home and have them work remotely, blah, 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 blah." First of all, in my opinion, especially in the logistics industries, you also know how to work remotely anyhow. It's the new thing. It's in. It's great, depending on your personality. Secondly, it's a bad headline if somebody gets coronavirus in your office. Bad headline. I love my people who work in Chicago, but there was a big broker in Chicago. That was a bad headline for like a whole week. Everybody was talking about it. So there is a business answer, and then there's a legal answer. You got your legal answer. Now you need to think about your business answer, because all eyes are on these companies, and the headlines sometimes are worse than the legal consequences. Another thing you need to think about is if your employees do get COVID-19 when they're in the office doing work, I think they can file a workers' comp claim. I have to check into that, but I think that might be possible. That shit's expensive, guys and gals. So that's another thing to think about. Oh, and the other thing that I told my clients, by the way, is when they were deciding whether their employees should work remotely or not. I know a lot of people think it's a hoax. There's a lot of opinions out there, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I was thinking worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is you do have someone who has this coronavirus thing and infects, or you have the paranoia going on in your office. You know that shit's going to happen like every 3 days. Somebody's going to sneeze and they're going to be like, coronavirus, blah, 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 blah. And then everybody's going to freak out and nobody's going to be getting their work done. And everyone's annoyed, by the way. If your employees are not working remotely, your employees are annoyed with you. Just so you know, every fucking day they're annoyed with you because everybody else is at home and their kids are at home and shit's a mess at home. Anyhow, I digress. So this is what I told my employees. If somebody gets COVID-19 for reals, and then, as you know, you can be either asymptomatic, allegedly to the CDC website says you can be asymptomatic and pass it around. You can pass it around for a couple of weeks before symptoms even show up. You could have like 5 or 10 workers out like that. I don't think that's worth it. I mean, that's a big business interruption versus just figuring out how to work remotely. So those are things that people need to think about when they decide. I thought we were past this topic, that most people were working remotely. Guess not. Oh man, my time with you guys is always going short. Let's check to make sure nobody has any questions about this topic. Oops, I go to chat. Okay, Frank is Frank is cracking me up. Yes, Frank, you're good at this. Frank brings up a great point. He said that the CDC has issued guidelines for disinfecting office areas. Pretty smart. That's a good point. Someone asked if I have graffiti in my home office. I do. What's wrong with graffiti? Graffiti's cool now. I'm a lawyer. I need to look and feel cool. Okay, let me just check. See the last message on LinkedIn to make sure you guys don't have any more questions, because I thought most of you were working remotely. I shouldn't assume. Shame on me. Hope you guys all had a good week. I hope you guys have found people to do Zoom happy hours with. I have a little group that I do Zoom happy hours with, and it's fun. Ooh, CM Evans, you ask another good question. This is a sidetrack, by the way. Will the jury be deferred from greater punitive damages if a punitive, I get made fun of for saying punitive is punitive, damages if a major accident occurs while hours of service are exempt? Okay, I'm going to go back to my statement in the beginning because it's a good question to come back to this, because I've been banging people over the head with this. You guys, a year from now, the jurors, or 2 years from now, when you go into trial or you have depositions because litigation takes forever, jurors aren't going to be as excited about us running loads of their toilet paper. They're going to be angry you killed a family on the road or allegedly hurt somebody. And no one's going to care if the hours of service were exempt. They really aren't. And the plaintiff attorney is going to throw in your face all this data about hours of service and fatigue and blah, 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 blah. It ain't going to go well. I promise you. It's not going to go well. Sometimes I wish I was a plaintiff attorney, because I think I'd be not only very, very good at it, but I think that I would make a lot of money. I could pay off my student loans. All right, let's go to your next questions. Yeah, Mr. Supply Chain says, really curious to see how the COVID-19 safety issues play out for everyone in the supply chain. He's right, actually. And also, I don't know I think COVID-19, we should all be ready from a supply chain perspective. And Mr. Supply Chain, Daniel would know this better than I do, but I think this is here for goods, for good. And we all need to plan to have this year forever and in the future. Protecting our drivers, protecting our dock workers. Already, on With the Truck, there was a pretty cool session about a driver who called in and talked about how he was checking in and out at a consignee and a shipper by kiosk instead of messing around with the bill lading and having an interaction with anybody. I thought that was pretty cool. And he said it was more efficient too. Jacqueline, I miss you, Jacqueline. Okay. Let's go back to our questions. I think we have time. I bet I can jam in 2 more questions. My company. I think, okay, here's the thing. Just to go back to layoffs really quickly. Most of you know this answer. I was recently laid off without warning from my employer. Isn't there a law against that? This is a hot topic. So each state, and you can Google this very easily, each state has laws around, or lack thereof, and they'll say it. We don't have, like Arizona, where I am right now, which is freaking awesome. It's beautiful weather out. They don't have notice requirements from a state level perspective. You can just lay somebody off. If you have more than 100 employees, perhaps warn, it's all caps WARN. You'll see that thrown around a lot. That might apply as well. But there are some exemptions. Off the top of my head, I think one of them is like the unforeseen business interruptions or something like that. This is off the top of my head because I didn't see this one coming. I should know this, but it's Friday. And I feel like that's pretty loosey-goosey. You could say that all of a sudden you got a lot of coronavirus hit your company and you needed to lay people off right away. I don't know a lot about WARN, but I do know that the notice, if it's less than 100 employees, you don't usually have to give notice. But you can Google it pretty easy on your state law website. All right, I'm trying to move fast so that you guys can get as much value as possible out of this. All right, let's switch to business questions. Let's get out of layoffs and non-competes. So your business questions. I thought this one was really cool. Where'd it go? I thought this one was pretty good. I'm like, most of the time brokers don't even think about this till it's too late. All right, I'm a broker and one of my carriers just got in an accident. Am I going to be liable? According to Mr. Joe, the plaintiff, who attended the Carrier 411 conference the beginning of this month, you are next in line to be sued. So carriers have usually $750 to $1 million in auto insurance, which these days doesn't really cover a lot. If you injure someone, depending on the state that the accident happened in, or you allegedly as a driver injured someone, the money doesn't go that far. So plaintiff attorneys are automatically looking to who is next. It's usually brokers and shippers. Brokers have become more popular because they have the auto coverage, and there's a lot of communications with the carrier that they can look to try to say that you control the carrier, you convince the carrier to drive faster or violate the hours of regs or take advantage of an exemption. You see where I'm going with this? So they like to do that. They also like to say that you should have known that this carrier had an accident before, had a DUI, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of good stuff. So yes, you could very well be liable. There's lots of good ways to sue you guys. And I say good because I'm being dramatic. But yes, you could. So often brokers will ask me, what do I do if the carrier gets in an accident? Well, first of all, you stay the hell out of the carrier's business. Then you let whoever's in your compliance department or your carrier relations department, let them know. It doesn't mean you automatically stop working with that carrier if it's a maybe over 50 truck carrier. But for now, I think the less you know, the more. You just ask the carrier, The less you know, the better. You just ask the carrier if they need support with anything. You help them transload. You get ahead of any towing issues, and because they'll end up being your problem as well. And you let the carrier handle their business. But you also will let your compliance department know, and they will deal with it. Okay, literally 1 minute. Let's see if we can find another good one. Oh, I promised somebody would answer this one. All right, all my broker clients are going to be all pissed that I answered this one. But I'm sorry. It's a free lawyer for anyone, including carriers. So, can a broker withhold payment due to a cargo claim dispute? There's a legal answer and a business answer. So, the legal answer is they should have it in their contract. It should say, you do control find and look at your carrier broker contract and look for the word offset. Sometimes it's one word, sometimes it's two word. Sometimes people flip it around and call it set off. And then next, you're going to look for withhold. That's your next term you're going to search for. If it's not in the contract, they don't have a legal right to withhold it. That's your answer from a legal perspective. From a business perspective, though, that's a different answer. Because if you have a cargo claim that is not being handled in a reasonable manner, timely, or your adjuster's yanking everybody around, or the broker is just utterly convinced you guys are at fault as a carrier and you owe it, the brokers are just going to withhold your payment. And that's to protect them because the shippers withhold their payment. It's like shit just rolls downhill. So don't completely blame brokers. Blame the shippers sometimes. And the other thing that I wanted to tell you was that even if you file a claim against a bond, which is usually what I'll tell you to do, sorry, brokers, but that's usually what happens. The broker can still say, there's a cargo claim. We believe they're responsible, blah, 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 blah. If you don't want your payment withheld, you should be in constant communication with the broker and talk to them about how you do need that payment and that you will continue to process the cargo claim and you're going to be a good partner. And the better and the more you're a good partner with the broker, the less likely they're going to hold your payment. Because I'll tell you what happens right now is that when it's time to withhold the payment, the carrier salespeople in the broker industry, in the broker company, the carrier salespeople will fight for the carrier. They don't want to withhold the payment. And if it's a good partner carrier that's running some more loads and has good experience with carrier sales, they're going to fight for you internally. Okay, let me make sure I go to my chat before I cut off because it is just me. I can go a little bit over. Frank says, though, it is better to have an offset provision where the carrier doesn't respond to the claim and it's resolved by a broker or forwarder. That's very true. I put offset provisions in all my contracts for my brokers. But also, I encourage my brokers to build very strong relationships with their carriers so we don't have these problems. Don't do the one and done thing. Let's just double check to make sure you guys don't have. Oh, and we can put up my other graphic. Look, I did that, you guys. Okay, so why the way? Oh, Ashley. Ashley wanted to know the difference between co-brokering and brokering. Co-brokering and broker-to-broker relationships. This is my favorite question. Okay, Ashley, you're going to bust up when I tell you the answer. The difference between co-brokering and double brokering is nothing. They're the same thing. Sometimes we use the word co-broker to make it fancier and then we don't get busted for double brokering, but it's the same shit. Look at my last video because I go into there are 4 things you need to know to properly broker a shipment to another broker as a broker. And there are 4 things that you can do to do it properly and to avoid risk. And I'll send you the video too, because I know that you're very busy. Let's go over to LinkedIn and let's just double check and make sure nobody has any pressing questions, even though LinkedIn, the majority are my friends making fun of my hair. Not my friends anymore. Okay. Hi, Kyle. Kyle is awesome. If you guys don't know him, he's in Canada. He's my favorite Canadian on the planet. Anna Wright just messaged you guys. She's from LinkedIn. She is the reason I have LinkedIn Live. She created the LinkedIn monster 10 years ago. That would be me. I'm a LinkedIn monster. I'm seeing a couple comments here. All right, here. I'll be quick. I did want to ask Jim. the considerations between making these exemptions and waiving the regs versus the safety. Because I do see and I do hear you, carriers, when you're saying these regs could so easily, whoever's calling me from Arlington, Texas, I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are and I can't answer right now. Just turn on my Bluetooth. Damn it. Carriers are angry, and I kind of do feel the same way. When regulations are just, I know they weren't simply waived, but I kind of want to say simply waived and excluded, because if toilet paper is so important, why is safety put second and toilet paper first? I'm trying not to get in trouble here because Jim just did me a huge favor about calling in, and I wanted to ask him that question, but I didn't want to piss him off either because I'm sure there's a lot going on in the government. He may not even had a choice. He's one of us. He's from Werner. He's in the industry. He knows us. So, and you can tell he has a thumb on that pulse. So, I don't know. I wanted to say the same thing, guys, but I'm told I have to behave myself sometimes. Okay. All right. I think I should stop before I wear out my welcome. But don't forget, every Friday I do this, you guys. Every Friday. I just sit here. Some Fridays, y'all don't show up, and I'll just still sit here and hang out with my friends and answer legal questions for you. Because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give you the option to have a lawyer for free. Thank you very, very much. And let me figure out how to turn this thing off properly so I'm not sitting here drinking, talking to my friends.